Hello everyone, I'm Jože Richteršič, and in the upcoming video presentation I will provide a short overview of the Dynamic Delegation Discovery System infrastructure. Rather than a dry technical talk, I will weave into a short story aiming to better explain the role of each component within the Dynamic Discovery infrastructure. In the vast digital landscape where our story unfolds, we meet our protagonists, Alice and Bob. Alice, a diligent employee, serves at NetBridge, while Bob, equally dedicated, finds his dream job at the Connect Club. These organizations, with their robust informational systems, stand as the pillars of efficiency. And now Bob's mission is to send a message on behalf of the company Connect Globe to Alice, utilizing his fine and state-of-the-art informational system. To achieve this, Alice and Bob have agreed to implement special modules called integrations. And once the integration modules are completed and thoroughly tested, Bob only needs the URL address from Alice's informational system to start sending the message. However, because they are transmitting messages over the internet, a place that is not inherently secure, they opt to safeguard their communication using the HTTPS protocol. To make this to work, Alice and Bob now need to exchange each other's TLS certificates. And the integration now functions seamlessly for Alice and Bob has aspirations to expand its use to other business cases and message types. Alice and Bob, with the foresight of avoiding redundant development efforts, they extracted the integration module from their initial information systems. They wisely choose to reuse this module for a new backend that supports fresh business cases and new message types. The act of reusing these components significantly reduces both development and maintenance costs. By ensuring that the components are loosely coupled, they make it easier to maintain and enhance the integration module. This approach enables different teams to take responsibility to the backend team, for example, to focus only to the content of the document processing, while the integration team handles the reliable and secure message exchange. Furthermore, this decoupling opens up possibilities where companies can externalize the messaging services to a specialized provider and even allow seamlessly replace the messaging services with new technologies and standards and without disrupting the backend systems. As the integration gained the heavy usage with the companies, they resolved to enhance it even further, and here is how they made it even better. They began by augmenting messages with additional metadata. This included conversational and transactional identifiers and service and action codes, and this metadata serves to two crucial purposes: routing. With this metadata, Bob and Alice could now easily route messages to their appropriate backends, and payload validation, because basic validation of the payloads and message metadata become now much easier. To enhance reliability, they introduced special signal messages into their communication flow, and these signals served as an acknowledgement and facilitate error reporting. To ensure stronger security message authenticity, they implemented the signing and encryption on the message level. And to implement all this enhancement, they didn't need to invent their own technical specification. An open standard Oasis AS4 came to their rescue. And the integration transformed to something more bigger significantly, and they name it access point, because this component now become the access point for all business messages for to and from the company. Alice and Bob had now successfully digitalized their communication. And encouraged by this success, they decided to extend the benefits to their colleagues and business partners. However, as the number of partners grew, maintaining the configuration for everyone became increasingly challenging, and Alice and Bob organized a meeting with colleagues to address this challenge. On the meeting, Alice proposed a solution inspired by their internal email system to build an address book or a register that would allow easy lookup of addresses based on recipient names or IDs. To achieve this, She suggested adding a new layer called the Dynamic Discovery Infrastructure to their messaging service. And how would this work? All members of the message exchange network should publish their addresses and certificates and other service capability metadata to the address book. This would ensure relevant information is readily available for everyone. On the access point upgrade process become also straightforward. They develop a dynamic discovery client enhancement that look up and retrieve missing data at sending event. Alice and partners no longer need to manually collect and maintain connectivity data for message exchange in their large network. They now just simply include recipient identifier in their message, and the access point retrieves missing transport data from the address book to direct the message to the appropriate access point. And since the address book contains service-specific metadata and not just the addresses, they decide to rename it to the Service Metadata Publisher. And with this enhancement, ensures seamlessly communication across their expanding network and simplifying the configuration management and improving overall efficiency. Was expanding, several of the new partners have already developed their own service metadata publisher component, and some of them has been utilizing them as a service provided by the SMP vendors. And given by their satisfaction with the existing solutions, they express reluctant to use shared new SMP component. So now Alice and Bob face the task of identifying the right SMP component for each specific final recipient. And to address this challenge, they have introduced a new component within our dynamic discovery infrastructure called the Service Metadata Locator. And the sole purpose of this component is to identify the appropriate service metadata publisher for intended recipient. And by incorporating this final piece of software, all participants could continue using their preferred SMP software or SMP service provider. But before we dive deeper into the description of the dynamic delegation discovery process, it is essential to highlight a critical aspect of our story. Because Alice and Bob, in their pursuit of setting up the message exchange platform, they established network governance body known as the business domain owner. And this governing body plays a very important role in defining the essential network rules and technical specifications. For instance, they needed to reach consensus on several fundamental aspects. One of them is, for example, document types to exchange. This decision was crucial because the backend systems require knowledge on the document structures to process messages automatically. Next one was the company identifiers, defining the unique identifier for each participant company or to identify registers which can be used for issuing the participant identifiers in the network. Next topic was about the trust model, so how to ensure the trust between the various components and their messages in the network. Next one was also to clarify whether this network would be public or closed one. Also, they had to decide how many SMP providers will there be and how someone become the SMP provider in the network. And similar consideration applied also to the Service Metadata Locator service. So, in summary, the governing body plays an important role in ensuring smooth functioning of the message exchange network. Now, let's get back to the dynamic discovery process. In the following 2 slides, I will give you a quick overview on how the dynamic discovery process works. In the first slide is about getting network ready. So, when the network components are set, the network governance body must establish a trust model which ensures the trust between the components. Because this step is very important from a security perspective, I color it red. The trust model is a combination of technical solutions and network policies. In short, all components must have valid and trusted certificates. The next very important thing is that all participants obtain a unique identifier for the exchange network. because with this identifier they will be addressed and it will be also used to locate their services. Next, the network participant must publish all the necessary metadata about services, actions, processes, documents, and where on which they are able to exchange. And at the same time, SMP registers an entry to SML in order to bind itself to the participant identifier. For example, in this case, SML can tell that the network that SMP2 is responsible for the NetBridge service metadata. All these steps are only required once and are preparatory steps. And when the step 3 and 4 are set, the company NetBridge is ready to receive messages from the participants in the network. So now we are ready to send the message. The original sender, in our case Connect Globe, creates the message for the company NetBridge and sets the NetBridge identifier as a receiver. Then Connect Globe submits the message to access point A. This is the only manual step. Everything else I will explain next is done completely automatically. Because the access point A doesn't have the URL address nor the certificate for the receiver A access point B, it uses Dynamic Discovery Client to locate them. First, the Dynamic Discovery Client submits the query to the SML for the SMP location, where the NetBridge company published the service metadata, and the SML responds back with the required SMP URL address, in our case, the URL address of the SMP2. Then, the DDC retrieves the URL address and the certificate of the targeted access point from the SMP2. But before the access point uses those data, it validates the data integrity and authenticity. This is again an essential step from a security perspective, therefore I again color it red. So now the access point has all the missing data and it's ready to submit the message. And when the access point receives the message, it validates it again, and this time the message integrity and the authenticity. And if all is good, then the message is valid and sender access point trusted the message is delivered to the final recipient. And with this, we concluded our presentation. I hope you enjoy our short story, and I would like to invite you also to see other our videos.